Welcome back everybody. Now we're out on the launch of the brand new Honda CL500 Scrambler today, and clearly Honda are going after some of Enfield's market with this. Most directly the Scram 411, but also maybe a little bit of the Himalayan. Now those bikes are super popular, they sell really well, but personally I don't think I've ever really got it. They always feel a bit too slow to me. So surely Honda have done a better job with this one. Well, we'll take it for a spin today and go through the exact same review categories as I went through with the Scram 411 last year to find out. Now, let's start by talking about the engine, and this is a proven little unit from Honda. So it's the same 471cc parallel twin with a 180-degree crank, as you'll find in the CB500F, the CB500X, the CBR 500R, and the Rebel 500. And they say that they've sold over 133,000 units in the last 10 years, so clearly there's something that people do like here. Now in this bike it's basically unchanged versus the Rebel, which is the bike it shares its design with most closely, although they have optimized the airflow to emphasize low-end torque, and they've also given it a one-tooth larger sprocket at the rear, so that should give it a little bit more zip when it comes to acceleration. But otherwise the figures are the same, so 46 horsepower at 8,500 RPM and 43.3 Newton meters of peak torque at 6,000. And look, that's the thing for me, it's a lot more power than the Enfields. I mean, sure, those bikes are great for chugging away in the low revs when you're riding off-road, but realistically, bikes like this do 99% of their riding on the road, and that's quite a big jump up in power, pretty much double. Plus, it gets the slip assist clutch and the 6-speed box, so both of those things help to make it feel a little more pleasant to use. And really, the only downside of this engine for me is the 180-degree crank, which gives it a bit of a bland sound, despite the admirable work they've done trying to tune the exhaust. But given how good it is in pretty much every other regard, I think I can allow it. So what have we got from a chassis perspective? Well, it's actually the same main frame as the Rebel 500, which is a really low-slung little cruiser style bike. Really popular for how accessible it is for newer riders, given that it's 690mm in the seat, but that's always felt a little too low and little for me. And so this CL500 is a lot more my riding style. It's got a new subframe, which is higher and longer. It's stronger too, because they've used thicker pipes, so that helps with riding off-road or carrying a passenger. It sits a little taller too, so it's got 150mm of travel in the fork and 145mm of rear wheel travel from the shocks. And the wheels and tyres are much more Scrambler appropriate, so instead of the 16-inch front and rear that you get on the Rebel with those big balloon tyres, this is a 19 on the front, 17 rear, and these are Dunlop Mixtor Trail Max, I believe, so they're a bit of on and off and have the right aesthetic. Brakes are from NISSIN, so you've got a single 2-pot caliper on a 310mm disc up front and a single pot caliper at the rear. And so what's it actually like out on the road? Well, this bike feels really light and slim, and that's because it is. It's a much more engaging ride to me than something like the Rebel 500, because you're up and over it and you feel like you can get on top of it more. And look, a 19-inch front wheel with semi-off-road style tyres is never going to give you the best in terms of front end feel, and the single disc at the front is never going to give you MotoGP levels of braking. But the key with this bike is to just waft between the corners, glide in, keep the revs up, and then completely nail it out, and actually it's quite good fun. Honestly, this is one area in which I'm not a huge fan of the Enfields as well. The brakes, suspension, the tyres, they all feel pretty budget, so I'll strike this one up as another win for the Honda. You've just got much more quality here, more feel, and a much more enjoyable ride for me. Now I should add a quick word about off-roading, because I know some of you will be wondering given the Scrambler image, but look, that's pretty much all it is, styling. I mean, we have done a little bit of light gravel work today for some photos, but really if you look at the stance of the bike, stuff like the ground clearance, it's not really up there with stuff like the CB500X or the Enfields. Clearly this is primarily designed to be a road bike, just with some throwback rugged looks. And so if you're serious about off-roading, probably buy one of the other ones, or better still, buy a dirt bike. Now before we get on to the next one, I just want to say a massive thanks to Insta360 for sponsoring this video. To get all the angles of the bike on the move, we've been using their X3 360 camera, and to be honest, it's been an absolute game changer, because you can just stick it on the bars and then get it into the editing software, and you can reposition the framing so that you can either point it forward at the dash or point it back at you. You can stick it down on the frame or the bar end and get the front wheel or the engine or the foot controls, and even on the passenger pegs here to get a shot of the exhaust or the rear wheel. Basically, if you've got a decent mount like this one that comes in their motorcycle kit, the world's your oyster in terms of framing, and also in the software you can export either landscape for YouTube videos or portrait for things like Instagram, TikTok and Facebook. Not just for professionals, I think for everybody, this is such a fun camera to use to capture your rides, so head to the link in the description to get yours. And also, I've just got news while I've been editing this video that they've got a spring sale on at the moment where you can get 10% off all accessories, plus their motorcycle kit thrown in for free, which is awesome because it's got everything you need to get started. So check out the link down below, and once again, a massive thanks to Insta360 for their support.
Now, what about comfort levels? Well, everything feels pretty neutral. Clearly it's built with the beginner in mind, so 790mm in the seat height feels sensible and really easy to ride, especially around town. But you know, one of the benefits of this Scrambler styling, even if it won't really seriously be taken off-road, is that you get the nice wide high set bars, which actually give you a very upright riding position, which is great again for town riding because of the ease of visibility you get. Also, you get the grippy foot pegs with the removable rubber inserts, which is a nice little feature at this price, and also that could be a real asset if you're commuting in the wet, for example. Now, I should add as well here that the wet weight is 192 kilograms, so as well as not being too tall, it's also super manageable from a weight perspective as well for less experienced riders. But overall, I wouldn't say there's a huge difference in comfort versus the Enfields, and so I think I'll call this one evens.
Now, from a technology and sort of features perspective, a quick look in the cockpit will tell you it's a very simple bike, and that's intentional. There's no riding modes, there's no traction control, just ABS, and I don't believe that's switchable, but the dash is quite nicely done, if not particularly punchy, and you do get LED lighting all round, including their emergency brake light feature, so that flashes the rear indicators when you're hard on the brakes, and that can actually be a very useful visual cue when you're on quicker group rides like today, or around town where rear end shunts from cars aren't entirely uncommon. Now, the only advantage that the Enfield could have in this category is the Tripper navigation pod, which is quite nicely done, but it is accessory fit. It doesn't come as standard, and so if you want similar functionality on this bike, you could use something like the Beeline Moto. They do sponsor the channel, but not this video. I'm just saying it looks pretty much perfect in the cockpit on this bike, and it does basically the same thing. So given that I slightly prefer the dash on this bike and I massively prefer the lighting, I'm going to give the point to the Honda. Now, if there is one area in which the SCRAM 411 outdoes this bike, it's probably the looks. Now, it has kind of grown on me over the course of the day, especially with the sort of accessories on the front end, but you can tell because of the tank shape and the frame that it shares a platform with the Rebel. And I think personally, for a Scrambler, a flatter line to the tank would have looked more in keeping. And I will say also, it's a bit of a mix of sort of retro styling cues from the original CLs, and they showed that in the presentation last night, and you can see where they've carried little things over, but ultimately I think the modern Honda design aesthetic really dominates the looks, and so it's neither one nor the other. It's not a modern looking bike and it's not thoroughly retro, it's just somewhere in between. And so yeah, while I do like some of the accessories on this bike, I think it looks all right in the green as well, especially with this brown saddle. You know, it can't really match the wholeheartedness of the Enfield's retro approach, and also there's a nice selection of colours for that bike as well.
Now, starting price for these is $5,999, which is pretty decent for what you're getting, but you got to say that it is a grand and a bit more than the Enfield, which starts at $4,849 for the SCRAM 411. Thing is though, I do think there's a pretty serious difference in terms of the build quality. Now, only a long-term test of the two would truly show which one held up best in the long run, but just from first impressions of the two bikes, this feels like much better put together. Then you got to consider that a lot of newer and younger riders are quite likely to PCP these bikes, and when you look at the monthlies, the difference doesn't feel so substantial. But ultimately, if you do judge them purely on which is the most affordable and gets you on two wheels for the lowest absolute cost, then look, it is the Enfield.
So with all that in mind, which one should you buy and which would I buy? If you want the more affordable bike and also the one that's potentially a little better styled, then sure, go for the Enfield. But if you do have that extra grand available and you want something that rides, in my opinion, significantly better, then the Honda's the one to go for. 100%, this is a much more engaging bike to ride on the road, and also it'd make a great little commuter as well. As always, I'd love to know what you think of it though, down in the comments below. And also, if you want to see all of the best scramblers on the market at the moment, I've made a list. I'm going to link to it here. Give it a click, give it a watch, let me know what you think, and I'll see you next time.